What's going on, everyone? Scott here. Welcome back to the channel. So we are in the last 2 weeks of Jen's journey on The Bachelorette. This week we have Fantasy Suites, and then we also have the Men Tell All. That's right, 2 nights, 2 episodes, Monday and Tuesday, which means 2 recaps this week, Tuesday morning and Wednesday morning for all of you. As everyone knows, there's 3 guys left. Devin, Jonathan, and Marcus, all at different stages in the process with the overnight fantasy suite dates this week, hoping to provide Jen with the magical word of Bachelor Nation clarity before going into a possible engagement. But before we talk about the Fantasy Suite episode and jump into all of that, if you could, just hit that like and subscribe button down there. We'll have another video tomorrow morning for Tuesday's episode, and as we head into the Golden Bachelorette in a couple weeks, there'll be more content and recaps available for the Golden Bachelorette as well as the end of Jen's journey here on The Bachelorette. So the opening scene, we get a little teaser of Devin talking to Jesse. It says that Jen makes him feel some type of way, but he doesn't feel like it and wants to feel wanted, but doesn't feel like he's the one. He says he can't do this anymore. Says it's probably the end for him, as it looks like he is knocking on Jen's door. So then we jump into the real beginning of the episode in Hawaii for the final weeks of the season. Jen has told all 3 guys she's falling for them. Molly Mesnick shows up. Obviously, we saw her a couple weeks ago on that radio date when they were in Seattle. Molly thinks that this week is the most important week because of that alone time, and I tend to agree. Just as a viewer at home, I assume most people agree that this is probably the most important week for everyone, this and hometowns, really, to see who you can really be good with. Obviously, the family part is a big thing, but then here it's like you get that alone time off camera where you get to talk about really everything, and Molly says just that, basically right there. Jen thinks one of the guys here will be her husband. Jen says that her and Jonathan have been a slower burn, but they've had exponential growth the last couple weeks, and he said that he's falling for her. She thinks he's in his head a lot. Marcus is someone that Jen's always saw a future with, she said, but she feels like she's been putting in more effort than him because it takes him a little longer to open up. We see Devin and Jesse golfing, as Jen says that Devin gets her, and he said that he's in love with her. Jen says she's not there yet, but she's falling a lot harder for him. Devin said how it is bothering him that he hasn't heard "I love you" from her yet, because how do you propose to someone if you don't know? And he brings up very valid points, like how are you supposed to, that's just part of this crazy process that is the Bachelor, Bachelorette, all this. Like, how are you supposed to propose to someone, especially if they stay true to the process the whole time and don't say "I love you" before it? They can give you as many reassurances as you want, but it's quite easy to get in your head. Jen says the biggest obstacle with Devin is self-sabotage on her end. She's trying to lean into her feelings and, kind of not trying to believe that it's too good to be true. Molly tells her not to question it and that she deserves all those things, to soak in those feelings with all of these guys to see where she's at, to get that, you guessed it, clarity going into this final week of the season and a possible engagement. So Devin gets the first fantasy suite date. They go for a helicopter ride. Jen says she's close to being in love with Devin. Doesn't say yet, though. They fly by a rainbow, some amazing views in the helicopter, land near a waterfall, then they end up at the beach to have some champagne and talk about hometowns and kind of what comes next and where they're both at. Devin talks about how much he's looking forward to getting back to a normal life, do normal stuff with her, and get ready to go back to work as well. Jen says she's trying to be cautious to let her feelings catch up to her head. Devin says why he loves her, and Jen says how it's sometimes hard for her to accept a good thing for what it is. She wants to lean into it, and she's trying, and she says that she's on her way there. Devin says, "I'll be there when you get here. You're worth the wait." But he still said that would be nice to hear that big L, even though she's done a good job of reassuring him throughout this process in the last couple weeks. At the night portion, Devin asks her what she meant by sometimes she can't recognize a good thing, and she says, just self-sabotage, and because of her bad relationships that she's experienced in the past. She says it's because she's never had anything like this before, and she's like, is this real? She doesn't know if it's real or not, and she's like, there's got to be something wrong here. Doesn't want there to be pressure from him on his end. She doesn't feel the pressure and appreciates that they're able to be themselves. Jen asks if he's ready for an engagement. He says yes. He's never met someone who accepts him the way that she does and would love to call her his fiance and wife, and how she's this rock that he didn't know he needed. She says, just can't tell you how much you mean to me. They keep teasing the big "I love you." Not there yet, though, for Jen. Jen says how she would love to be in love with Devin, and she'll know it when she knows it. They both agree to stay overnight in the fantasy suite, and in the morning it seems like they both had a good night, and Jenn says she's a happy girl and says she feels amazing. She said she's beginning to accept that a good thing's just a good thing. They both feel aligned in their future as well, Jenn says, and Devin says he feels calm and comfortable. Jenn also mentioned that she can see the future with him and hope that can help him get out of his head a little bit. Devin's elated, but knows he can't hang on to this moment forever. Says he'd be crushed if he said I love you to her and she went around and said it to someone else. Well, hang on for the rest of this episode, Devin. Jonathan gets the next date with Jenn. Jonathan thinks the next step is just going deeper with her after he said he's falling for her. Jenn says she is falling for him, even if it was a slow burn at first. Jenn picks him up in a Jeep and they drive around, go to some markets. They pull up to a sweet store, dessert store, and Jonathan's like, no, are you going to make me eat sweets? She's like, it's time to break the diet. Like, I think you can deal with one day off the diet, Jonathan. They laugh, they have a good time, and again, a normal date, something that, as Jenn even says, that they could be doing on a normal day back in the real world. They head down to a waterfall, able to sit down and talk some more. Jonathan says, I want to be that breath of fresh air for you. And Jenn says, I don't want you to be afraid to emote or tell me how you're feeling. Jonathan is trying to be more open, knows it's now or never. At the night portion, Jenn says she has very strong feelings for Jonathan, that they have a strong foundation and have a lot of fun together, but want to get past that fun part and, wants him to talk more about, growing up and what he wants in a family and more deep stuff like that going forward to get to that next level. Jenn opens up about how her growing up and how her parents were immigrants and, growing up in a predominantly white suburban neighborhood and having to kind of hide who she was in her words, maybe having to bring a different lunch as an example she used and such just to fit in. Jonathan says how he would love to have a mixed family, as obviously we saw it last week in his hometowns. He comes from a mixed household and mixed family as well and wants their kids to go through life confident in who they are. They both agreed to stay overnight together in the fantasy suite, and Jonathan wakes up and says how the feelings are so far ahead of where he thought they would be from night one. And it seems like a good night, and Jonathan said the vibes are through the roof and that he can't contain it. He says he can see this being something absolutely incredible. As we see, Devin is kind of still in his head, a little bit freaking out, or I wouldn't even say freaking out, just kind of anxious about the whole process. We're getting down to the nitty gritty here, the kind of end of the road for everyone here, whether it's going to end up in a proposal or heartbreak for everyone involved here. Said he feels like he left Jenn's feeling less of himself than he did walking into it. Giving out love, he doesn't feel like he's getting in return. Devin says he's been the safe bet before in past relationships, doesn't want to be that second or third option, and he doesn't feel like he's that number one option, just feels he's like one of the options. Marcus and Jesse are hitting some balls on the range, kind of talking before he goes on his overnight date with Jenn. Marcus knows this is the most important week so far. He knows that she's a bit ahead of him right now in terms of where their feelings are at. But he says he's spent years running from this. As well as things are going, he said he's not at that point of being in love yet, but he says he's doing everything that he can to get there, and it would be wrong for him to get down on one knee right now. And it would be unfair to Jenn, given that he's not there yet. He wants to see what she sees in him and why she's chosen him throughout this process. Jesse says, you're an inspiration and you deserve to be happy. Can tell Jesse's trying to help him along here with him, kind of struggling to open up, and Jesse can kind of probably see it from both sides there. He doesn't know if he's trying to find feelings that aren't there. Marcus meets Jenn for his overnight date. Jenn says that since the second one-on-one, the feelings have continued to grow and grow, but she's scared that she's further along emotionally than he is. She says she's in love with Marcus, so officially she is in love with Marcus and has been feeling it for a couple weeks now, as she says. They hop on a boat and set off. He says he was feeling really good after hometowns, but has been getting in his own head when they're not together. He says he feels closer than he has in a really long time, but that it's terrifying. Jenn agrees as well. They're going snorkeling for the date portion. The manatees at night that light up. They get the full scuba suits on and head on down, and wow, absolutely incredible views. At the night portion, Jenn says that she is in love with him and not to tell him would be a disservice to their relationship. She said she does see him there at the end of all this. Marcus says that he's nervous because after the last rose ceremony, he knows it's not a given that he'll have another week, and he can be in the middle of trying to get there and get sent home, and that bothered him. He said that this was the first time the first night that he kind of got in his head, and it was hard for him to recover from that. He says proposing is something he only wants to do once, obviously, and the most important thing is being a good husband and father and being present as well. Wants to feel certain and have that confidence. He says there's so much potential right now and so many things that have aligned with us and have never experienced this with anyone, but he does tell her that he's not in love with her yet. He tells her he's worried because he feels unsure. He doesn't know if he's putting pressure on himself because of how fast this process is and how fast, kind of the end is approaching. It's been hard to get to a point where he feels comfortable saying he's in love. Obviously not what Jenn wants to hear. He starts to say, I'm sorry, and Jen's like, you don't have to apologize. You're following your heart and what that means to you. She said there's a lot of different places of love and types of love. And she said I'd be lying if I said I wasn't in love with you. Feels she needed to say it to get it off her chest, and not for him to say it or, kind of like a repercussion here. Like, she said it, to try to have him say it. She said that's not what this is at all. She said it'd just be doing a disservice to herself if she didn't say it at this point, especially at this point in the journey. Marcus is emotional and says he's going to keep trying as hard as he can, even when he's afraid or uncertain. He said, even though I'm not there yet, he wouldn't be sitting here if he didn't think that was a possibility. You deserve all the love in the world, and I'm trying to get there, Marcus says to her. He said hearing she was in love with him is something he didn't know he needed to hear until he heard it, and realizes how important their connection is to her. They both agreed to stay overnight in the fantasy suite and looking for that alone time to grow together and for him to get to a point where he's as certain as her. Looking for confidence and, you guessed it, clarity. I gotta say though, they have the coolest setup for the overnight dates. They have like a little treehouse setup, it looks like, and Jenn can see a very happy life with Marcus. And she's hoping that he's ready to propose to her and is in love with her at the end of the week. Seems like it was a beneficial night for the both of them, growing closer together. He still thinks the sky's the limit with them and needs to meet her where she's at. Said that this helped him with some of the doubts and it was a good step for them. Jenn is happy to hear that, obviously, and she leaves him with, don't start thinking too much. She said, though, that it is hard to be in love with someone who's not there yet, especially with meeting the family next week. Then we're back with Devin, who is struggling, says he's waiting for something that he doesn't know if is coming, referring to if Jenn is going to say that I love you back to him. Jesse comes to talk with him and help him out. Explains to Jesse how he's been struggling and how he wanted to ask her if she loved him as much as he loves her. Didn't feel whole when he left the room, as when he was saying I love you to her, she was just saying that I can see a future with you. Feels like he's withering away and she's growing with the process. And Devin says that Jenn said that he makes her feel some type of way, but he says, why can't I feel it? He doesn't feel like he's the number one. As he said before, feels like he's just one of the ones. He feels selfish though, as he says, because he's letting that stuff get to him, but it's a part of him. As he says, that's how he came into this journey, and that's, a part of who he is. He is upset he didn't get to ask her and say everything that he wanted to say at the overnight portion, withheld what had been bothering him. But as he said, he would have never given her an ultimatum. Jesse says, you gotta hang on, you gotta fight. Like, would you really stop now? Especially this close to the end. Devin says his gut is strongly disagreeing with his heart, and that is never a good sign. He says that he can't do it anymore moving forward. He goes to Jenn's room to talk with her and be brutally honest, as he says. Says it's probably the end for him. Cliffhanger as we get him knocking on the door and Jenn answering. So tomorrow we'll get to see that conversation, what comes from that conversation, assuming the rose ceremony as well. Plus we'll get the men tell all and Grant as the Bachelor. First interview on Bachelor. I know he did some, I think, like GMA and some of that other stuff, but first time on The Bachelor or Bachelor franchise, seeing Grant as the new Bachelor. Then next Tuesday, the ending to Jenn's journey. Get a quote from her. She thought that she knew how she wanted the day to go and woke up with a completely different feeling. We see her showing up at a door, as we saw again the clip of Jesse saying, are you okay with however this ends? And then the kind of last scene of that promo for next Tuesday is her knocking at someone's door. And as Jesse says, no Bachelorette has ended her journey like this. And I'm obviously still very intrigued to see how this whole journey ends. Obviously, again, I say it every time, but no spoilers here. I still don't even have, I've had a couple guesses throughout that I don't think are correct now going into the finale. I know a couple weeks ago I was like, oh yeah, Devin seems like the most sense. For a while it seemed like Marcus made the most sense, but over the last couple weeks it's like, I don't think Marcus is getting there. But back to Devin for a second here. I do feel like his intuition is probably right, as we see that she's said to Marcus and said aloud that she is in love with him. And Devin is fully there with her and showing her all these things, but she's not there yet with him. And it's clearly not being fully reciprocated. But I'm interested to see how that conversation plays out on Tuesday and what happens at the rose ceremony as well. Jonathan as well. I feel like there hasn't really been anything wrong in their relationship. It was just kind of a slower start. So if she feels like she's a little bit further along with Marcus, with Devin, then it could be Jonathan going home on Tuesday night. But, who knows what comes from this conversation with Devin. Do I think he's going to self-eliminate? No, I think he'll at least show up to the rose ceremony. And, hopefully, if he does stay in this journey for his sake, that Jenn can give him some more reassurance for where that she's at. And maybe if seeing how the night went with Marcus the night previous, before this conversation happened, maybe she has a little more clarity in her head of, oh, maybe, as she said, accepting a good thing is a good thing. Especially in terms of what we're seeing on the show. She says these things, she thinks like, oh yeah, like Devin's a good thing, like checking off all our boxes. So maybe she sees like, hey, a good thing's a good thing, and she is able to convince Devin to stay. But that is to be determined. So looking forward to Tuesday night, seeing what comes from this conversation, as I said, see what happens at the Men Tell All. Obviously that is always filled with drama, and looks like this year is no different for this season. But anyway, that'll do it for this one. Again, we'll be back tomorrow morning for the recap of Tuesday night's episode. So thank you all so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Peace out.